The microphone slipped from Steve Harvey's fingers, hitting the studio floor with a metallic clang that echoed through the silent Family Feud set. In 30 years of television, he had never stopped a show mid-recording. Not for technical difficulties, not for celebrity outbursts, not even when contestants gave answers so outrageous they left him speechless. She realized that the most powerful thing she had sacrificed wasn't her pride, but her fear of being judged. And in doing so, she had gained something infinitely more valuable: the knowledge that her story could inspire others to rewrite theirs. The microphone that fell to the floor that day was picked up within seconds, but the impact of what happened when Ashley Martinez shared her truth, when Steve Harvey chose to honor her courage, when a game show became a platform for celebrating the kind of strength that doesn't make headlines but changes everything, continues to resonate with everyone who witnessed it. Because sometimes the most powerful moments in television happen not when you follow the script, but when you throw it away and follow your heart. Sometimes a teenage mother's quiet confession can teach a studio full of adults what real courage looks like. And sometimes the best prize isn't money or fame, but the recognition that your story matters, your dreams are valid, and your sacrifices have turned you into exactly the kind of person the world needs. Share and subscribe. Make sure the story is never forgotten, because Ashley Martinez proved that being young doesn't mean being weak. Being a mother doesn't mean giving up dreams. And sometimes the most powerful voice in the room belongs to someone who almost didn't believe she deserved to be heard. The business card is framed next to her acceptance letter to college, next to the photo from that day when she learned that dreams don't have expiration dates. They just sometimes take different paths to reach their destination. And true to his word, Steve Harvey was one of the first people Ashley called when she passed her NCLT exam and officially became a registered nurse. "I told you so," he said when he heard her voice. "Dreams delayed are not dreams denied. Now go change the world." 3 years after that unforgettable episode, Ashley graduated with honors from the University of Texas nursing program. Ethan, now 4 years old, sat in the front row wearing a tiny cap and gown that Steve had specially made for him. In her graduation speech, Ashley spoke directly to young mothers watching. "Your dreams don't disappear when you become a parent. They just get company on the journey." Steve attended her graduation ceremony, bringing with him a new jacket identical to the one he'd given Ashley years before. "This one's for when you become a doctor," he said, winking, "because I know that dream isn't finished either." Ashley laughed, the same genuine laugh that had charmed the studio audience, but now it carried the confidence of someone who had proven to herself and the world that courage compounds over time. The Martinez family still watches Family Feud together every evening, but now it's expanded to include Ethan, who claps whenever he sees Uncle Steve on screen. Ashley often finds herself thinking about that moment when everything changed, when she chose honesty over image, vulnerability over perfection. The Johnson family, their competitors, left their podium and crossed the stage to embrace Ashley and meet Ethan. What had started as a competition had become something else entirely, a celebration of courage, resilience, and the kind of love that transforms challenges into strength. As the cameras continued rolling and the celebration continued around them, Steve knelt down next to Ashley, who was now sitting in a chair that had been brought onto the stage. Ethan was reaching for Steve's tie, and Steve let him, smiling as the baby's tiny fingers explored the colorful fabric. "You know what you reminded me of today?" Steve said softly, speaking directly to Ashley, but knowing his words were being captured for the millions who would eventually see this moment. "You reminded me that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear nursing scrubs. Sometimes they carry babies while they chase their dreams. Sometimes they're 16 years old and braver than people twice their age. The episode aired 6 months later, exactly as it happened, with no editing to remove Steve's unprecedented decision to stop the show. The response was unlike anything in game show history. The show received over 75,000 letters, emails, and social media messages from viewers sharing their own stories of young parenthood, delayed dreams, and the courage to redefine what success looks like. Ashley Martinez became more than a Family Feud contestant. She became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that sometimes the most profound strength comes from the quietest voices. Colleges across the country reached out offering scholarships. Nursing programs created new pathways for young mothers. And Steve Harvey's foundation established the Ashley Martinez Scholarship for teenage mothers pursuing careers in healthcare. But perhaps the most profound change was in Steve Harvey himself. That episode, which became known as the Jagged episode among fans, marked a turning point in his approach to hosting. He began seeing his role not just as an entertainer, but as someone who could recognize and honor the extraordinary courage that ordinary people bring to his stage every day. Ashley kept Steve's jacket and his business card. The jacket hangs in her dorm room at the University of Texas, where she's now a sophomore in the nursing program, maintaining a 3.8 GPA while raising Ethan, who is now walking and saying, "Mama," clear enough for everyone to understand. Steve looked at her with that paternal warmth that had endeared him to millions of viewers, ready to make one of his gentle jokes about how cute the baby was, how family participation was reaching new levels on Family Feud. "Ashley," Steve announced with his usual enthusiasm, "the survey says, name something people sacrifice for their dreams." Ashley paused longer than contestants usually do. The studio audience waited. Steve waited. Something in her expression had changed. A shift from the careful composure she'd maintained throughout the game to something rawer, more vulnerable. She looked down at Ethan, then back up at Steve, then directly into the camera, as if she was speaking to someone specific, someone who needed to hear what she was about to say. "My pride," she whispered into the microphone. The words hung in the air like a confession. Steve's eyebrows raised slightly. It was an unusual answer for a teenager. Most kids her age would say money or time or sleep, but there was something in the way Ashley said it, the pain in it, the truth that seemed to carry more weight than two simple words should hold, that made Steve pause his usual routine. "Your pride?" Steve repeated, his voice gentler now, stripped of performance. Ashley nodded, and that's when Steve saw the tears. Not the happy tears of excitement you might expect from a teenager on national television. These were different. These were the tears of someone who had lived through something, learned something, sacrificed something that most people her age never have to consider. "Survey says," Steve announced, but his eyes never left Ashley's face. The board revealed it was the number 3 answer. The Martinez family should have celebrated, but Ashley hadn't moved from the podium. She was still standing there, holding Ethan, tears streaming down her face, looking like she had more to say but didn't know if she was allowed to say it. That's when Steve made the decision that would define this moment forever. He set down his cards, walked away from his hosting position, and approached Ashley at the podium. The producers in the control room were frantically trying to figure out what was happening. This wasn't in any script. This wasn't part of the show format, but Steve wasn't thinking about television anymore. "Ashley," he said softly, his voice barely audible to the studio audience, but picked up clearly by his wireless microphone. "What did you sacrifice, sweetheart?" The studio fell completely silent. Even Ethan seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. Looking up at his mother with those wide, curious eyes that babies have when they're trying to understand the adult world around them, Ashley looked at Steve, then at her family, then back at Steve, as if she was making a decision about whether to trust him with something precious and fragile. "Everything," she whispered, her voice breaking. "My childhood, my friends, my graduation, my plans for college. I was supposed to be a doctor. I had a scholarship to UT. I was valedictorian." But then she looked down at Ethan, who was reaching up to touch her face with his tiny hand. "But then I got pregnant, and everything changed." The camera operators, who had filmed thousands of hours of Family Feud, found themselves adjusting their shots, not for entertainment value, but because they were witnessing something that felt sacred, something that deserved to be captured with the respect it demanded. In the control room, producers who usually focused on timing and commercial breaks were reaching for tissues. Steve Harvey had hosted Family Feud for over a decade. He'd seen emotional moments, heard heartbreaking stories, witnessed life-changing wins. But this was different. This wasn't just a contestant sharing a personal struggle. This was a young woman bearing her soul, honoring the choice she'd made, acknowledging the sacrifice while refusing to call it a mistake. "But you know what I didn't sacrifice," Ashley continued, her voice growing stronger. "I didn't sacrifice him." She kissed the top of Ethan's head. "And I didn't sacrifice my dreams. They just look different now. I'm going to be a pediatric nurse instead of a doctor. I'm taking night classes. It's going to take longer, but I'm going to get there. We're going to get there." The audience began to react, not with the typical game show applause, but with something deeper, something that recognized courage when they saw it. But Steve wasn't finished listening. He could see there was more, that Ashley had been carrying this weight for so long that finally being able to speak it aloud was both relief and revelation. "Ashley," Steve said, his voice thick with emotion, "how old are you?" 16, she said simply. "I'll be 17 next month." The number hit the studio like a physical force. 16. This poised, articulate young woman, holding her baby with such natural grace, was still a child herself. Steve Harvey, the father of daughters, the man who had built his career on family values and understanding what it meant to struggle, found himself in completely uncharted territory. Behind the scenes, Steve made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something that caught the studio lights, his personal business card, but more than that, something he had never done in decades of hosting. He took out a pen and began writing on the back of the card. "Ashley," he said, his voice now carrying a gravity that transcended entertainment. "I want you to have this." He handed her the card. "On the back, I've written my personal phone number, not my manager's number, not my assistant's number, and I want you to call me when you graduate from nursing school. Because you're going to graduate, you're going to achieve your dreams, and when you do, I want to be one of the first people to congratulate you." Ashley took the card with trembling hands, trying to balance Ethan while reading what Steve had written. The camera caught the moment when she read his message. "Dreams delayed are not dreams denied. You're going to change the world, one patient at a time." Steve Harvey. But Steve wasn't done. He began to remove his suit jacket, the same jacket he wore for every taping, the one that had become part of his television persona. He gently draped it over Ashley's shoulders, being careful not to disturb Ethan. "This jacket has been with me for every Family Feud I've ever hosted," he said, his voice clear enough for everyone in the studio to hear. "It's seen families win and lose, celebrate and cry. But today, it's going home with someone who understands what real winning looks like. You didn't lose your dreams, Ashley. You just proved that love can coexist with ambition, that being a mother doesn't mean giving up on being everything else you want to be." The studio erupted. 300 people rose to their feet in spontaneous applause. But it wasn't the typical game show cheering. It was the kind of applause that recognizes something profound, something real in a world that often feels manufactured. But when 16-year-old Ashley Martinez whispered those two words into the microphone, everything changed. The cameras kept rolling, but this was no longer television. This was the moment when a game show host realized that some stories are bigger than entertainment, some dreams are worth more than prize money, and some sacrifices deserve recognition that transcends any stage. Ashley Martinez shouldn't have been there, not according to the traditional rules of Family Feud, anyway. Contestants were supposed to be adults, family representatives chosen for their quick wit and competitive spirit, but life had forced Ashley to become an adult long before her 17th birthday. She stood at the Martinez family podium, her 8-month-old son Ethan balanced on her hip, representing a family that had learned to redefine what strength looked like. The studio lights caught the exhaustion in her young eyes, the kind of tiredness that comes not from a long day, but from carrying responsibilities that should belong to someone twice her age. Steve had noticed Ashley immediately during the family introductions. There was something about the way she held her baby, protective but gentle, that reminded him of his own mother when he was young. The way she answered questions with a maturity that seemed borrowed from someone older, wiser, who had seen more of life's challenges than any teenager should. During rehearsal, Ashley had been quiet, letting her aunt and cousins take the lead, but when she did speak, her answers were thoughtful, precise, carrying a weight that the other family members seemed to recognize and respect. The Martinez family had driven 18 hours from El Paso, Texas, to be on Family Feud. They weren't wealthy, far from it. The trip to Atlanta had been funded by a combination of saved vacation days, borrowed money, and the kind of family solidarity that emerges when everyone understands that sometimes you take chances on hope. Ashley's aunt, Maria Martinez, had applied for the show months earlier, before Ashley's life had taken its dramatic turn, before everything changed on a cold Tuesday morning in March, when 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test redefined everything Ashley thought she knew about her future. The game progressed normally through the first 3 rounds. The Martinez family was trailing slightly behind the Johnson family from Birmingham, but Steve was in his element, cracking jokes, doing his signature reactions to unexpected answers, creating those moments of connection that made Family Feud more than just a game show. Ashley had answered one question correctly, earning applause from the studio audience and a warm smile from Steve, but she seemed content to let her family members take the lead, focusing her attention on keeping Ethan calm and happy under the bright studio lights. But during the 4th round, something shifted. The category was things people sacrifice for their dreams, and it was Ashley's turn at the podium. She approached the microphone with Ethan still in her arms, the baby's small hand grasping at the bright lights above them.